the number one skill set that you need in order to properly heal this pattern that you have and ultimately date more effectively and attract a great relationship. And a lot of people think that the number one thing, and this is after, thousands of calls with women, the number one thing that we hear that people think they need is to just spot red flags sooner and learn how to make different choices. But that's not actually the number one skill set that you need. The number one skill set that you need in order to overcome this pattern is courage. Courage, which, if we look at the Latin root word of courage, cor means heart. So being willing on a certain level to reopen your heart and keep your heart open. Let's go back to what a lot of people think that they need is to learn how to better assess or be able to sense red flags sooner and make better decisions on those things. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if we were to take a look at your love life history, and especially when I talk to women on the phone, 90% of these people that we speak to or more, when they get really honest, and again, the truth is never comfortable. When they get really honest, say that they sensed or saw or heard red flags with their ex-partner immediately, within the first date, within the first couple of weeks, within the first month at most, and they continued for many years oftentimes to continue tolerating that bad behavior, overriding, ignoring red flags. So it's not necessarily that you need to see red flags sooner. If you have childhood trauma or a history of unhealthy relationships, you are likely very perceptive to your surroundings because trauma reshapes how your brain, it rewires, it leaves an imprint on how your brain is wired. And for a lot of relational trauma survivors, they are very, very perceptive to their environment. They're sensitive to facial expressions. They're more sensitive to tones in somebody's voice and to the energy that somebody brings in when they walk into a room. So a lot of people will say that I'm an empath. I feel things very deeply. That is true to a certain extent, but research shows that only about 15% or less of the population is actually born an empath. The other 80 to 90% of people who say that they have empathic tendencies actually have relational trauma or childhood trauma. So it's never really about just seeing the red flag sooner and taking action, because you probably saw and see bad behavior and get gut feelings and get warning bells with no problem, right? Those things hit your radar and you get those. The problem then becomes taking action on that in an empowered, effective way. And that requires courage. And that's something that we see that stops a lot of people from truly healing and moving forward. So I'll give you some common examples of how people avoid courage and instead use coping mechanisms that are unhealthy, that keep them in this state of fear and self-doubt and mistrust of themselves and mistrust of their future and ruminating about the past. And the first one is isolating themselves after a bad relationship. They tend to pull away, especially if they had a lot of shared married friends or they had a lot of shared community together, like at church or work or different organizations. They tend to pull back and isolate themselves out of shame and out of feeling judged, out of feeling, they don't want to feel like the only single person in their group anymore. And so they tend to pull back and isolate themselves socially. That's one unhealthy coping strategy. And all of these unhealthy coping strategies, by the way, people use these because on some level, they remove pain and create a temporary sense of pleasure, but it's not long lasting. And it also creates a sense of safety. However, if you were in a toxic relationship, a lot of these same unhealthy coping strategies that you may now be using right now to keep yourself out of pain and out of your feelings are likely the same coping strategies that you used in the relationship to tolerate and minimize bad behavior. So the first thing is isolating This will keep you in fear, ultimately will keep your trust issues and your guard up. And it definitely is an antithesis to building your courage muscles. Being a workaholic is another one that we see commonly, or being chronically busy. We get a lot of applications every week, and a lot of people will complain, I'm working crazy hours, I don't have any time for myself. And this is helping me keep my mind off of my ex, but I'm also burning out in the process. I don't sleep well at night. I wake up in anxiety. My performance at my work is going down. I'm being reprimanded by my superiors, et cetera. My team is falling apart because I'm not leading them effectively. So if you are turning to workaholism, this is often a common way to keep your nervous system out of balance. If you were in a toxic relationship, your nervous system was out of balance there. And over time, the longer you tolerate bad behavior, the more you subject yourself to gaslighting or manipulation. Never your fault, but if you stay, it tends to impression your nervous system that that's the norm, that living in a state of chaos is the norm. And so people will continue to create that sense of chaos when they're single by being a workaholic and isolating themselves from meaningful connections or friendships after they leave that relationship. Another way that people use unhealthy coping and avoid courage is by turning right into dating. Now, I'm a big advocate of dating, and a lot of people will do the opposite, where they'll wait years and years and years and work hard on themselves before they feel ready to date, and then walk right back into another toxic relationship, even if they waited 5 years, 10 years in some cases. So it's not about the length of time that you wait. However, for some people, they will jump right on 4 or 5 dating apps or a couple of dating sites within a month of filing for divorce, or even before they file for divorce, and want to distract themselves and distract from the inevitability of being alone and facing herself by kind of focusing on other people. This can be especially true if you're in a helping profession, and maybe you are turning to your career or workaholism to dampen your feelings or to kind of numb your pain a little bit. But if you are jumping right into dating pretty quickly after a bad relationship, and especially a divorce where you stayed many, many years tolerating mistreatment or not feeling fulfilled, the problem is never resolved by just jumping straight into dating. And then finally, another unhealthy coping strategy that we see here pretty often is avoiding getting professional help. And there is, or not being consistent with a level of support that you invest in. You're not consistent in professional help. And there's a number of reasons for this. Some people don't feel aligned with their therapist or their coach that they work with. Some people they're more tied, being a workaholic and isolating themselves gives them a little bit more a sense of safety, ironically, than actually facing their feelings and facing their dysfunctional patterns, healing their trauma, processing that trauma. So people will avoid seeking professional help and think that if they just take enough time off and if they just work a little harder on themselves, and if they just, get a few more months or a few more years out of their relationship, or if they just give it more time in dating, that eventually they'll figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you've had a history of not having good, healthy relationships and not having good practices, setting boundaries, and you shortchange yourself and you have poor boundaries and people pleasing in other parts of your life, especially your career, you don't communicate your needs effectively, you shove down conflict, 9 times out of 10, waiting for it to get better by itself, it rarely does. And in fact, what I see is that a lot of times it gets worse. People will take a lot of time off. And this is, just from women that we've talked to here and have worked with inside Break the Cycle. People will take years off of dating. They'll get into counseling. They do 4 or 5 years of counseling. Then they take a lot of time off dating, and then they start dating again, and they attract another unhealthy relationship and fall for another person who's emotionally unavailable or even emotionally abusive, and it fuels the story of what's wrong with me. So all of those things, those coping strategies, isolating, being a workaholic, not seeking professional help, thinking you can do it all on your own. What was the other one? Jumping into dating too soon. All of the things that I listed are actually trauma responses. So if you think that I can do this all on my own, or maybe you go to counseling, and sometimes we see people even here that enroll with us, they'll really start having a breakthrough, and they'll really start having like a run of amazing results. And it's almost like their subconscious is like going, okay, no, this is too much. Things are going too well. This is too close to the truth. I need to pull back. So it's really important to understand that all of that can be a response to complex trauma. Isolating, keeping yourself chronically busy, avoiding deeper, more meaningful interpersonal relationships, including a coaching or therapeutic environment. That's classic telltale sign of somebody who has or may have relational trauma. And in order to overcome that, courage is required. Courage is required to have a healthy relationship with yourself. Courage is required to face yourself and to accept your feelings, especially the bad feelings and the shame that you hold over yourself. Courage is required to turn your lens from taking care of everybody else and focusing on putting out fires in your life and mothering people, mothering your kids, mothering your employees, mothering your partners, for Christ's sake. It takes a lot of courage to stop those patterns that you've been unconsciously, for the most part, playing out in your love life, and turn that lens in on yourself on a consistent basis and learn how to feel your feelings fully, learn how to face conflict and communicate through conflict, learn how to set boundaries with people and maintain and uphold those boundaries without feeling guilty, without guilting yourself, without resenting other people. It takes courage to do that work. And on top of courage, it takes consistency. And this is like across the board, out of the thousands of people that we've talked to, is the number one thing that people lack in their healing journey. They'll go to counseling for a few months after their divorce, or maybe they went to marriage counseling when they were married, and then they felt like they kind of plateaued. We get a lot of people who say, I went to therapy, I felt better, my therapist thought that I was doing better, so we didn't need to go to any more sessions. And that's fine, but then, they get into another toxic relationship, and then, a year later, they're down in the dumps again. So I'm not bashing talk therapy, but sometimes it can have its limitations when we're trying to break a pattern that we've been unconsciously repeating, especially in our intimate relationships. So you have to have courage and consistency. If you've been, taking a lot of time off dating, and then you get on dating apps and you're on a dating app for a month and you don't have any luck, and then you tell yourself it's not worth it, love isn't worth it, men are not worth it, I'm just going to be happy alone. And again, nothing necessarily wrong with that, but there's a lack of consistency. And when we talk to thousands of people at this point, and they don't have a good relationship, the number one root cause behind that is trauma most of the time. The second biggest reason is a lack of consistency. They're not consistent in following through on boundaries. They're not consistent in showing up for themselves. They're not consistent in their healing practice. They're not consistent in implementing new behavior. And if you were to go to the gym, January 1st was not too long ago. Most people, join a gym, and then by February, they're back to their old patterns, lack of consistency. But if you, for an example, wanted to compete in a bodybuilding competition or a bikini competition or some type of, physique where you're showing off all the progress that you've made in your body, it's going to require that you go to the gym consistently, and that you have a consistent diet, and that you have consistent sleep, and you have consistent good hygiene and habits, and all of these things combined together. Olympians don't become Olympians when there's a lack of consistency. And the same thing applies for you. If you think about it, if you have a great career that you really love and you feel aligned with that, you probably had a lot of consistency in terms of your education and the way that you show up at work to get you to this point. But if you don't have the kind of relationship, especially romantic relationship that you want, it all boils down to your ability to implement courage, to be courageous, and be consistent in your journey moving forward. And listen, in terms of relational trauma, people who are wounded the most in relationships are the most terrified of emotional intimacy, rightfully so. However, if there's a desire that you want to have fulfilling relationships, if you desire having that connection with other people, if you desire at some point to have a healthy relationship with an intimate partner in a romantic relationship, there's a conflict in you. You want it, but your fear is too great. And the only thing that is going to overcome that fear and your trauma-based patterns is courage and consistency, and working a trauma-informed plan consistently. So if you're a successful career-driven woman, if you have a really poor, lousy track record in your love life to the point where, you're ashamed about it, you don't want people to know about it, and you want a great relationship, but the things that you've tried in the past to help you get there, like therapy, talking about it, analyzing past situations, reading a lot of books, taking time off dating, working hard on yourself, going to the gym, all these good, healthy things that you've already tried to get there, but they're not getting you where you want to be. And you know that you're missing something. You know that there's like some puzzle piece that you're not quite getting, and you want to change, and you know that you are the common denominator. Then I invite you to book a free breakthrough call and go to bethanydotson.com/talk. And we'll have a very honest conversation about, number one, your pattern that's holding you back, your fear-based pattern. And then number two, what you want, the clarity around the type of relationship you really want, the clarity around how you want to feel every day. 99% of the people that we talk to are anxious every day, even people who are on medication. They feel overwhelmed. They feel like they're just going through the motions in their life. They don't feel happy. And this is from people who are just out of a bad relationship to people who've been single for many, many, many years. And they want a great relationship, but along the way, they want to feel confident about themselves. They want to feel emotionally stable. They want to feel emotionally healthy. They want to be a better mom, be more emotionally present for their kids, for their team, for their employees if they lead a team. So if that's you and you are ready for change and you're ready to transform your trauma into something beautiful and not feel regret over the choices that you've made in your life, but look at the choices that have happened to you and the choices that you've made as some of the greatest gifts of your life, then I invite you to book that free call. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk. If we feel like we're going to be a good fit to help you get where you want to go, of course, we'll talk about those details and what that looks like specifically for you. And if at the same time we don't feel like we're going to be able to help you for whatever reason, we're going to point you in the right direction for you and give you the resources that you need to get to the next step in your healing journey. So that's what I have for you today. And I'm wishing you a wonderful week and happy Monday. And I will talk to you soon. Take care.